Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. Got a great show for you today, but before we get into it, quite a few housekeeping items. All of these are important, so stick with us here for a few minutes. The first, you may have heard in the last couple shows, we've launched a new way to support the show. This is a listener-supported podcast. We're not getting anything from sponsors. Because that's how I want to do it. But we've got a new way to support us called Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/cloud-based mayhem, or you can find those links all over the website, cloudbasedmayhem.com. There's a really cool way to support the show where you kind of set it and forget it. And we've also got on there, only for Patreon members, some bonus material from time to time. And I've just uploaded about a 10-minute story from Larry Tudor back in episode 29. We talked with Larry for a couple hours. That has been by far our most popular show to date. We signed off after a couple hours, which I shouldn't have done. He was just rolling in so many good stories. But anyway, signed off. Luckily, I kept recording because he immediately started recounting what I'm calling the magic bus tour. All these pilots got on a bus way back when, a bunch of hang gliders back in Beer in India, and they all promptly took some acid, and then the transmission ran out on the bus, and that's all I'm going to give you. Head on over to patreon.com/cloud-based mayhem if you need a really, really good guffaw in your life today. It is absolutely hysterical. I've been promising I'm going to drop that. I've been going to drop that into a show. I've finally done that. Go over, check it out. It's awesome. Another thing we talked about a lot in the last couple of shows is reserve throws. And I mentioned that Cody Matank had been teaching me last year when I was training with him down in the desert about putting your wing into a solid tail slide, or at least a deep stall, but tail slide's quite a bit easier with both hands, grabbing both brake toggles before you throw your reserve. A really great story in the last episode with Tom Payne about him getting into a helico situation that goes bad, and he throws both of his reserves right into his wing. Sounds crazy, but it's actually not that uncommon. And as in his own words, he should have died. Luckily, he got out of that without any injury, but it was a good reinforcement that, yes, ideally, that is the way you want to throw your reserve. But there are a lot of things that are difficult about that. When I put that out on the website, when I put that out on the show, it started a conversation on paragliding forums. Some of you may have seen that. I asked Christina in this show is with Christina Kolb, who just won the World Acro. She's our new World Acro champion. She won it this year in Annecy. I asked her about that. So we go into it a little bit in this show, but obviously that's ideally. If you're in some kind of horrific situation, especially if you've got a multiple riser twist situation, obviously you can't pull your brakes down into a tail slide or a deep stall. And so that's not going to work. Potentially, Christina says you can reach up above and pull the brake lines down with one hand. That would be an incredibly acrobatic maneuver. Not saying it can't be done. It probably can. But anyway, this is obviously an ideal situation, is if, the best way to throw so your wing doesn't auto restart or start violently whipping when you go to throw and throw your reserve right directly into your wing. If you practice tail slide, they're not very hard, and if you can hold that with one hand, all the better, and then you're in a nice stable situation to then throw. The obvious question then is, why throw if you're in a stable situation? Well, then the answer to that, of course, is, if you've got a massive unrecoverable cravat, or you've done some acro full stalls, you've got some kind of situation in your wing that you can't resolve and you're running out of time. So there you go. Next thing I wanted to talk about is insurance. USPA the last issue just came out with an article for me about insurance, which is absolutely incorrect. I've contacted the magazine to put that correction in the next one. As far as I know correctly, the the post that I've put on my blog, cloudbasedmayhem.com, about insurance is totally updated and it's totally correct right now. But in the article, I mentioned that the GeoSAR insurance offered through Spot and DeLorme doesn't work, which is true. There's a paragliding and hang gliding exception. But I recommend using the Medevac, Geos Medevac insurance, but that doesn't cover paragliding and hang gliding. So the only one I know of is through Seven Corners, their dog tag extreme policy, and also there's another one through World Nomads, although I'm hearing that the World Nomads coverage is quite a bit inferior. So rather than go into all that now, because this is really just specific to US and Canadian pilots and not everybody else who's listening right now, sorry about that for you folks, but go to my website, cloudbasedmayhem.com, put in a search term insurance, and you'll see that article. I've also made some updates on my Facebook page, so you can go into that. Film tour. I'm going on a little mini film tour with North Unknown next week, starting at VIMF, Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival, Saturday the 18th. And then I'm going to be heading south with a date pretty much every day. You can find all this on the website, cloudbasedmayhem.com, and you can also find it on my Facebook page and on the Cloud Based Mayhem page. But I'll be in Seattle over at the North Bend Theater on the 19th. I'll be in Portland at the 20th. We're still working on a venue for Bend, Ashland area on the 21st. We'll be in Palo Alto at the Stanford campus on the 22nd. We'll be we're still looking for a venue for San Luis Obispo on the 23rd. We're going to be at Santa Barbara at the Sandbox, being hosted by Patagonia on the 24th. And then we're working on a venue in San Diego for the 25th. So I will be at all of those shows. The film's about an hour. It's a Red Bull Media House film that documents Dave Turner and I's full traverse, unsupported traverse of the Alaskan range. It's been winning tons of awards lately. It premiered at Banff in November. Very, very few people have seen it. I hope you'll come out and check it out. Funds from the tickets are a portion of them are going to go to the Foundation for Free Flight, and the rest will cover venue expenses, and the rest of that will go to my X-Alps campaign. So hope to see you out there. It'll be a lot of fun. I'll have a ton of sponsor swag. It'll be a good time. Finally, this show, Christina Kolb. I was contacted by a few different people who said I really had to talk to Christina. She won the World Championships in acro this year and was 12th overall, and a massive achievement. This gal is just super obsessed with paragliding, loves it, and was just down in Chile and Brazil and was witness to quite a few accidents. So as a common theme, like we get into the show here, as we often do, we talk a lot about safety and progression and training and what you can do to prevent these kinds of accidents. Some of them are in some ways kind of mindless, very, very preventable. We talk about a lot of things that we've talked about in other episodes, but it's always great to get it from a female perspective, not least of which we talk about the importance of SIV, who it's right for, who it's potentially wrong for, the importance of ground handling, why acro pilots are so much better than cross-country pilots on the ground, and that's just because they practice. No great mystery there. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Christina was over in Austria. We had a little bit of trouble with the sound in the first few minutes, but I don't even think you'll notice. That quickly goes away. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Christina Kolb, and I hope to see you on the road next week with North Unknown. Cheers. Christina, it's so great to have you on the show. We've been trying to do this for, I think we're getting into the months, not even weeks anymore. But thank you so much. It can always be tricky to line up when we're in completely different time zones. So why don't we start off with that? Where are you and what are you doing these days?
Hi, Gavin. Nice to finally be able to talk to you. So yeah, that was quite a hard one. Right at the moment, I'm in Austria. I've decided to break off a journey in South America, a flying project in Brazil, which was like turning pretty weird at the moment. So I decided to go back home and to spend the winter snowboarding and relaxing, which has been great so far. Yeah.
A flying project that went weird in Brazil. That sounds like a great place to start. What happened in Brazil?
Well, actually, a lot happened before we ever got to Brazil. So by the time we were actually there, I just wanted to go back home and to hide in a hole and to never come back out again. Yeah, it was a lot of stuff happening. We had a car in Chile which had broken down in the meantime. We had bought it like a year ago. So that was a big factor. There was like nothing I could do about it. I'm not good at mechanics, and there was this car hanging out. We couldn't move to Brazil, which is where we wanted to go. There were a lot of accidents in Chile this year. The weather was a bit different and the accidents were pretty bad and horrible. I spent a lot of time at the hospital accompanying friends. I didn't really felt like flying anymore. Well, there was a lot of stuff happening, like kind of things where you just don't want to go out anymore in the end. And by the time we actually got to Brazil without the car by bus, my MacBook had got stolen on the bus and I was just ready to like run back home and hide.
Wow, gosh. I mean, there's some stuff we're going to have to talk about there. What was the plan, and what were you guys hoping for in Brazil? And also, who's we? You keep saying we.
All right. I'm usually traveling with my partner, boyfriend, Alan. He's a very good pilot too, very passionate. So we're usually traveling and flying together. So that's we. Yeah, so we were planning on going to Brazil and doing a little project with the president of the female flying movement there, I guess, the female paragliding movement, which is called Saia para Voar, Go Out and Fly. And it's pretty nice. In Brazil, actually, there are 600 lady pilots. We're flying more or less frequently, I guess. So, which is a lot. I didn't know about that. And this lady is my friend's role as a president of that movement or whatever is basically to promote flying for female pilots, to get more people out there, get safety standards up and all that. So we were planning on traveling with her through Brazil and traveling to the most famous flying sites, basically having a look at it and getting more people out there going out to fly.
Hmm. And but then that didn't really come together. Are you going to be planning to going back to do it more, or um, where's your head now with flying after the accidents in Chile and getting your Mac stolen, and yeah, just taking the winter off?
Basically, that was it. Yeah. It was weird when I came back home. I thought about flying just from behind my house, a little small flight. My mom was offering to drive me back up there. And, you get these mental images sometimes when you think of something. Well, my mental image was one of a helicopter and somebody just laying on the ground. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty bad.
Hmm.
That's not what I want to associate flying with. So I basically, yeah, I'm taking my time off. I started to do some speed riding. I'm snowboarding a lot, which is really nice. And I've flown my new Emily Smile, which is really nice as well. But I'm taking it easy and I'll see what will happen or what will come up. I've got a few ideas and projects in mind, but for now, just letting it flow and see what happens, I guess.
So before we get into your big win last year in Annecy, you became the world champion in acro, which I want to talk about. That sounds awesome. Can you give the listeners that don't know a lot about your history? How'd you get into flying? What was the impetus? Bring us up to speed with how you became the world champion.
That could be a long or a short answer.
Yeah, let's go long.
Let's go long. Okay. Right. So when I was like really young, maybe like 8 or 9 years, we had a pilot flying from the hill behind my house and he barely took off. He just got his feet off the ground. But I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. And my mom was, yeah, right, exactly. Guess I've been always, yeah, I've been always doing things a bit like out of the extraordinary or being fascinated by it. And when I was like 15 or so, one of a good friend of mine started flying. He was a very crazy guy, like very crazy. And we were all like, yeah, he's probably not going to survive it. And in the end, he did. He became good and he became a tandem pilot and he started taking friends along. So I was, of course, among the first to
Put your hand
do
up.
the queue. And yeah, exactly, exactly. And it was really nice. It was exactly what I was always looking for or hoping for. But then I'd started backpacking all around, like just going back home to work, get some money and go back off again with my backpack and whatever. So I did that for like 2 or 3 times more. And yeah, then the time came where I was like, okay, now I got some money and some time. Let's do that paragliding license. And I never got off it again. I was just addicted, I guess, from the first moment.
And
So then was traveling.
where is home, Christina?
Home is Austria,
But
or
where
home base.
you said you saw somebody fly out behind your house. So where in Austria?
It's a really small village close to Switzerland, like 400 inhabitants. I think you wouldn't
Oh
know it.
wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. I've flown a lot over there, but maybe the X Alps route will take us by your place this year.
We're in the foothills.
Okay.
But I might
Okay.
come out and see the X Alps. It's something that I'm starting to get more interested in.
Yeah,
Seeing
you
cross country.
mentioned before we started recording, you mentioned that you're quite into hike and fly. I like this. It sounds like you got this kind of immediate passion. Was acro the first draw, or well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of things. So keep taking us through your history here a little bit. So you got into you did some tandems, and then you took the lessons, and then you never looked back.
Yeah, basically that was it. Yeah. So it was all just paragliding, and like it shows the place where I studied for its flying sites when I had to do years abroad because I had a language related studies. I chose them according to the flying sites, spent some time in Argentina flying, spent some time in Guatemala flying, in Spain, in Granada. Yeah.
You were choosing the places to study around paragliding, which I love. That sounds like a smart thing to do. And then how did acro start coming into the fold?
Right. So for me, it's always just been flying. Like even if I just had a sledder, I was happy. I just wanted to fly. That was my thing, and I didn't really think about where I wanted to go or that I really wanted to become good at something. And acro has been really fascinating to me, but I just didn't have any people around who were flying acro, so I wasn't the kind of person to go out and just pull on it and try myself. And at some point in Chile, in Iquique, which is a place I've been going back to a lot of times just because the conditions are pretty steady normally, except for this year, and pretty awesome. I got to know two acro pilots, and they told me about this place called Organia. And so I was like, yeah, why not? I was living in Granada at the time, which was supposed to be really good for flying as well, but that winter was pretty bad, which is why I left for Iquique. And yeah, so on my way home from Granada to Austria, I stopped by in Organia, and I planned on just staying there for a few days or something. And yeah, ended up spending the whole summer there. It was just a place to be. The people were perfect. The people were really, really nice, and were the reason that I finally like got into this dream of doing some acro and doing some fancy movements in the air. And I kept on going back to Organia, and that's how it all started. And I never really had that goal. I mean, infinity was of course something that would have been really, really awesome to do, but I was just flying along and having so much fun, and one thing led to another, and one trick led to another, because once you know that, you want to know more and you want to try the next step, and that's how it all built up, really.
And what was it like? Did you literally learn your first acro over the dirt in Organia, or did you come into Organia with quite a bit of background? Tell me about the kind of learning process, because I think a lot of people, when they think about learning acro, they get quite, I don't know, just worried, hesitant to learn it over the dirt.
Right. I basically had an atypical learning process, I guess, in acro. I learned about everything above dirt, or above ground. I had my first full stalls, which were really horrible and catastrophic and traumatic in a SIV. It was
Mm.
SIV was a great experience, but my full stalls were just really, really bad. Like, I guess either you're lucky with the first ones, they work out and you'll have a nice and smooth progression, or they're really horrible and you'll have a trauma.
Ah,
And
what happened? And where were you? Who was instructing?
Well, that's not to make bad publicity. I was just
No, no,
only
no.
flying for 6 months, and I was in Austria at the Aachensee.
Okay.
Really good instructors, but I was just like too eager and like, yeah, I want to do it all. You know, you get this list of SRV stuff that you want to do, or tricks or maneuvers or whatever. And I
But
had
okay,
like
so you were over the water for the full stalls.
I
This
was
is a
over the
proper
water. Oh
S.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay, gotcha.
Proper SIV was all good, fortunately, because I was thinking about maybe pulling it above the snow and whatever, and I'm really, really happy that I didn't do that. So
Mhm.
that's a good idea to do. Yes.
And did they end in throwing a reserve, or they were just ugly?
Nope. But
Okay.
they were ugly, and I almost landed in the water like a few times. It was funny. We were a few girls who all fucked it up at the same time, and our instructor was afterwards like, "Ah, it seems like you three put your head together." And we're like, "Oh no, never do it again." And actually, it took me 4 years to go back to doing full stalls again. And when I went to Organia, the people were just so nice. The pilots there, they basically bared with me for a month of annoying everyone. Like, oh, so what happens if the full stall goes wrong? And what happens if that happens? And what could happen if, and like, I was literally running after everybody for a month and just bugging them with full stall questions. And in the end, they actually flew out with me. Two good friends, Renan and Rafinha, flew out with me. We're like, Chris, full stall now. And like pulling besides me. I was like, oh no,
Right.
okay. But they got this thing started. Without them, I think I would have never done that. And actually, so yeah, about the ground flying, for me, altitude has always been much more important than water. A lot of the flying sites above water, I know, are very low, and I appreciate altitude much more than water. Like, of course, if you throw a rescue, you're happy to be above water. But well, I guess it's also the state of mind that you're in when you're flying above the ground is much more concentrated. I've had the experience that people come above a lake and do stuff they don't have the basics for doing just because they're like, oh, now I got water, now I can fly acro. But they don't actually know how to fly better. It's just that they're like, oh yeah, water, whatever. It doesn't matter if I throw a rescue. And yeah, I don't know if that's a good state of mind to be in. So people who fly above the ground are more concentrated usually and more conscious of what they're able to do, and maybe follow the progression a bit more, because it's not so nice to throw a rescue above ground as above water, that's for sure. Yeah, but for me, yeah,
I know that there's some really good stuff there. So for people that are, thinking about, one of the things we come back to again and again on the show is SIV, and the importance of that kind of training, and the importance of acro training, even if you're not getting into acro, just how important those skills are. Given, the the trauma of your first full stalls, and how that, because one of the things that Jockey said, which I thought was really interesting, is that SIV actually isn't for everyone. What the first SIV really does is it boosts your confidence, that this is not something you should be scared of. But he said for some people, it actually is quite traumatic, and they can have the experience like you did and not come back to it. I mean, really, the first one, you're not learning that much. It's more just getting over that fear and getting a little more confidence. And then you've got to come back to, I know Andra was saying, you have to really do 300 full stalls before you're even really starting, which I thought was just terrific. That you really need that muscle memory. You need to just do it over and over and over again, so it becomes like doing a wing over. It's just nothing. You just do it. You can do it in your sleep. So, what would you suggest, given what you went through? What would be the ideal way to go through that kind of training?
The ideal way. I think it depends on the person. Like, everybody's got different goals, and I think it's a good idea to know what you want, to know where you want to go with that first SIV. Of course, goals change afterwards. But for example, I've been doing like everything that I dare to pull by myself above ground. Like, I've done all the collapses, the frontals, the accelerated, not accelerated. Everything I dared to do myself. So I knew I wanted to go there in order to do the full stall, because I didn't dare doing that above ground by myself. For calmer pilots, just do the first collapses that they don't dare do at home in an SIV. That's great. And I think if you know what you're going for and why you need those things that you're going to learn, it won't end up being traumatic in a sense that you won't do it anymore. As about the repetitions, like, that's, SIV. I mean, even if you do 3 frontals or something in the first SIV, it doesn't mean that you know how to deal with each and every one that will come up in your life.
Well, you trust your wing, doesn't it? Well, no, it's true, isn't it? I mean, I think what it does in the beginning is it teaches you that you shouldn't be so afraid of your wing, right? I mean, it's like, whoa, I'm still alive. This is still okay. This little collapse is more benign than I thought it would be.
Basically, well, it can also be worse, but it shows you how it is to have troubles in the air, and to give you time to get used to this, and to know, oh, I have that much time to react, and I have time to think, what do I have to do now? Because not every collapse, not every full stop, whatever, not every incident is the same, right?
Mm.
So you basically learn how to mentally deal with it. Yeah. And then after having done your first, whatever, 10, 5 something collapses, full stops, whatever it is you're learning in an SIV, you can or cannot, according to what your instructor says, go home and practice it and do the 300 or however many it takes you to really know what you're doing. So SIV is great, but it doesn't mean that you're doing an SIV and then you know everything and you never have to do one again. Of course not.
Sure, sure. And so now we're back in Organia, and you've spent the season there. Did it click at some point, like, hey, I could compete, I could, but at that first season, were you already thinking like, oh, maybe I could win a world championship? Or take me back to that timeline.
Well, the dream came up like, oh, it would be nice one day. Champion would be really nice, a feather in the cap, right?
Yeah.
But no, the competitions were never the goal. There wasn't a goal. It was just having so much fun flying and so much fun learning this stuff. And now seeing that, like, I've come as far as I've wanted to come for now. I guess there's slowly coming up the possibility of going on with twisted stuff and all that. Now I'm seeing that the way was much more important than actually being here, or was much more fun. Like the most fun I was having when I was learning those things, and not now that I'm flying them pretty proper and whatever. So yeah, comps were not a goal. The goal was just to continue doing what I love, which was flying in any way.
Right.
And comps are stressful. And for me, it was always something like, whenever I'm ready to do a comp and like not be really stressed out and put myself under pressure, but just do it because it's fun and I know how to do it and see what comes out. That's the time I might go and try it. Yeah.
And when was your first comp?
That was maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
2014 or something. I tried one. It was really, really bad. I had actually one run. We had horrible weather. That's the thing in acro competitions. You often have horrible weather.
Well,
Timing.
in cross country too.
Same, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of throw yourself out in really bad conditions sometimes. Fortunately, not always. And if you're unlucky and you're having a bad run, or like, the level of the girls to the guys is not the same, you might only actually have the chance to do one run, which is what happened to me. And after one run, we were cut, which means like in the beginning, you're maybe 30 something pilots. And when the time gets short for the last day or for the last 2 days, only 25 pilots, the 25 best will go on. And I wasn't in those. And I had to drive home after 5 days of rain with one run and like being last or something. I was like, never again competition. That's so screwed up. I'll never do that again.
But then you went back to it.
Yeah, last summer, people, I don't know. Yeah, I was like, basically, let's give it another try this year. And if nothing comes out, well, I've tried it at least. I've been thinking about it too much for not trying it at least.
And what are you, I'm curious to know. It sounds like you're traveling a lot with your partner, your boyfriend, who's also a pilot. Is he also a professional pilot? Is he making his money from paragliding, and you are too? Is this how you're earning a living, or is this a pastime?
He is a paragliding instructor, SIV instructor, and tandem pilot. So he earns his money by paragliding, but not by being a professional pilot. I get my material sponsored, but for now I'm basically working as a translator and sometimes as a paragliding instructor and a tandem pilot.
Tell me about instructing. What do you teach? Total newbies, or are you taking them on a cross country? Are you guiding? Where do you fit into the fold there with instruction?
Mostly total newbies. Sometimes
Okay.
I'm working as a starter for SIVs, but I love the newbies because they actually they still believe what you're telling them, which is quite nice. As soon as they're a bit progressed, usually people, when they kind of need you, but they don't want to need you. So they're like, oh, I didn't hear you there. Sorry. yeah, right. um, Yeah, I like newbies. They're usually quite grateful, and it's nice to see progress. It's nice to see them actually trying the stuff you're telling them and it works. And And yeah, they don't come up telling you, no, it's I did that because of na na na, because of what happened to me back then in na na na, and telling you half an hour, like arguing with you about why they didn't do what you actually told them to do. I like the newbies.
Okay, so as a pilot now, and a pilot who's won the world championships, and also as an instructor, one of the questions I always ask is, "What's the best advice you've ever received?" But I want to ask you the opposite. What's the worst?
Well, the worst advice, I actually didn't have any idea about it until now, but now something just popped up in my head when I was in Guatemala, and there was this guy who was like, only real pilots fly like this, the dragon, how do you call it? The dragon position for the brakes, basically. And then you wrap your hands like three times about around the brake lines. Like it's impossible to get out of your brakes in a like difficult situation or something. And basically those were tips I often got on my travels, where people come up to you and go like, real pilots only do it this way and there's no other way, and that's the way you
Mm.
have to do it if you want to be a real pilot. I think those were usually pretty bad pretty bad tips or whatever, or things that worked for that special flying site but that wouldn't work anywhere else, and that just left little margin for alternatives or alternative thinking. And I think that's a pretty bad way of looking at it, because it fixes things, right?
Ah,
uh,
okay. Oh, I like it. That's good. Yeah, interesting. So,
you
so
haven't had that so far,
too much
like the
reliance. Well, for me, and one of the reasons I was kind of laughing as you were saying that is I think I got really lucky with surrounding myself with good mentors early on.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
like when I go to beer, if, for example, in India, the first couple times I
uh,
flew there in 2009 when I was really just starting to learn how to fly bigger cross country. I learned very early on that I had to really, consciously ignore what was going on at launch. Like if you get tied
oh
up in a
yes,
place like beer where you've got a couple hundred people, got a whole lot of people that shouldn't even be flying, and it's kind of a zoo and a disaster. And if you start watching, I watched this guy one time take off, spin the wrong way, pull the wrong brake, spin right back into the hill and break his leg.
oh
If
that's horrible.
horrible stuff like that, and it happens all the
Yeah,
time there. And
oh
and
yeah, oh
uh,
yeah,
and so if you pay any attention to that, so I'm the guy on launch that just goes. I get ready, I get set, and I go. And I
yeah,
don't,
yeah,
I just
absolutely.
don't ever, I'll jump in front of people. I'll be really not rude, but I don't like to just stand and wait and wait and wait and watch. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just I just ignore that. So that's my advice is to is to ignore all that.
Absolutely. I
But
think absolutely. You
but
have to kind of your own bubble, right? Where you're like
yeah.
concentrate on your stuff and you don't see and hear all that stuff. Because if you see somebody having an accident just before you take off, I think that doesn't put you in a good headspace, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think
So yeah.
Mad Syndergaard, we had him on the show a while back, and he's written a book about this. But he talks about priming, and he talks about priming your head for success, and that's very much a part of it. If there's
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
sitting
yeah.
next to you on the way up to launch talking about an accident, that's a good time to put your headphones on.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Oh yes. Well, I mean, it's really mean, but I think that's all. It's the difference if you're sitting in Organia, which is a place where there are a lot of acro pilots, or if you're sitting in a place which is a typical cross country hunt, whatever. Acro pilots tend to do a lot of ground handling, which just makes them good at taking off. It's just a fact. And whenever there's cross country competition at an acro site, we actually always have to fight like, oh, those acros are flying in front of the takeoff, na na na. And the acros are like, oh, but you cross country guys don't know how to take off. And it's like very satirical, but actually there's a grain of truth in it. So I would
Absolutely.
sit in Organia for 2 hours talking to acro pilots, because I know I won't see anything horrible like that. Like normally,
Mm.
there's always space margin for error. But yeah, the typical, I guess, if you're at a cross country competition or something, I've been to some of those like very typical places, and that's the place where I look the other side as well, I guess. Yeah.
Mm. So I was actually I was planning on starting this podcast off, before we even bring it in with you, mentioning I've been talking about in the last couple episodes. We had Tom Payne on the last show, and he recently had a really scary incident where he had a helico go bad. through his reserve right into his wing,
Oh,
through a second reserve directly into his wing. We were talking
oh shit.
about probabilities and one versus two reserves, and how and it's actually after talking to him, realizing and hearing other stories that it's actually not that uncommon. And if you're in a really bad situation where there's, like a auto restart and the wings, anyway, you're out of control, and you in some ways kind of get unlucky. But one of the things I learned from Cody, I was doing some acro training with him over the dirt last winter, he's always talking about having your wing in a solid tail slide or deep stall before you throw. So with one hand pulling both
Mm-hmm.
toggles down and then
Mm-hmm.
throwing a reserve. And this was something that he's practiced and trained and was talking to me a lot about. So I mentioned that on the show, and it started a
Mm-hmm.
topic on the paragliding forum where people are confused about that, because how would you get your wing into that kind of configuration if you're in multiple twists, because you can't pull your brakes down then. And
Yes.
I would just like to
Yeah.
get your acro perspective on that. What do you guys practice and train for throwing? Or do you do that? First, do you do that? And then two, if do you reach above and pull the brakes down and then throw, or do you just throw?
Yeah, right. Well, so first of all, I'm pretty bad at that. I haven't done any training on my rescue until I actually needed it, which is pretty bad and not advisable at all.
Hmm.
But well, it was just never the time. I was always at the lakes when it was too cold. So I needed my rescue like 3 times in my life, and it was always in a constellation where I didn't really have much room for reaching up and pulling the deep stall. If you manage to, it's definitely a good idea. Like I had to throw a rescue twice when I was going into auto rotation.
Hmm.
I don't know if I personally would have to force to pull my wing into a deep stall at that point, because if I could do something, then it would be to stop the wing from auto rotation. And if that doesn't work anymore, well, if you have to force to do that, it's for sure a good thing, because that auto rotation might probably eat your rescue. Definitely.
Mm.
If you're twisted, I don't see how you could manage unless you really reach up high. If you can reach it that high and wrap those whole whatever C lines or D lines or whatever you get, B lines around your hands. If you're strong enough to do that, yeah, go for it. Whatever you can do to calm down your wing and to give you some space in order to throw out the rescue into free space, as we call it, for it to open freely, yeah, do it, whatever. But every constellation is different. So if you have the time, if you know how high you are when you throw, and you have the time to just analyze it quickly, a few milliseconds or 1 second or whatever, to analyze what's happening, it will save you a lot of that headache afterwards, right?
Mm.
You have to take the time to see where you can throw your rescue.
What are,
um
what are the things that you guys are talking about a lot in Organia, like when you're on launch, and what are the most common sources of misery that happen, with in the acro scene? Because I'm not in it. I don't know a lot about it. I just know that, like you said, the acro pilots are so much better on the ground, and of course with wing control in
yeah.
the air. It's but I imagine there's still. Are there maneuvers that you guys worry? Are there some that worry you a lot more than others?
Yeah, but it all depends on the level, really, right?
Mm.
Like a beginner might be worried about his first sat or the first full stalls, which is always a big, a big topic,
Sure.
or whatever. The top might be worried about not getting their twisted infinite straight into whatever, into axis long enough for the points to count in a competition. Like it really depends on the level. Safety is always an issue, especially if something has happened that was not nice, and to talk about how that could have been avoided. Um, like flying the tricks properly is an issue, which is more like interesting from a technical point of view. But I think safety is a big issue as well. Yeah.
Christina, I want to rewind a little bit again to all these accidents you just saw back in Chile. Now that you've had some time to process it, I imagine, and agonize over it, I'm sure. What are if you could have rewound the clock and told those pilots that got hurt, what would you tell them?
I think I tell them to heed basic advice that you actually get while you're still in flying school, and that's still valid. On the first day, we had a crash between a hang glider and a paraglider, and that just means that you haven't been watching. I mean, that's something that's totally avoidable. That's something when I make a curve, I watch what's behind me, right? If I'm crashing into somebody or something like this, it's very basic. But if there are still crashes like that, it might mean that we still have to remind people of heeding basic stuff. I don't know, there was an accident. There were more accidents in rotors, and Chile looks easy and cross-country flying there is easy, but rotors are still rotors anywhere on the world, and you have to take certain precautions while you're flying through them. Stuff like that, or when you're flying, I mean, very basic stuff. I guess it's time to repeat them because I've seen too many things happen like that. When you're crossing the town, make sure that you're high enough, because if you're not high enough, you're standing somewhere between an electric line and the roof. It's just like that. I mean, shouldn't be having to say that, but it happens. So yeah, might as well repeat it. I don't know, not trying stubby touches or ground spirals while the air is really bumpy. I mean, it's really obvious, but we have accidents like that every year in Chile, and it's horrible. So yeah, getting to know your wing, taking off, ground handling, lots of ground handling, just to take that stress of a takeoff that you don't actually know how to handle. And yeah, I see many pilots who just kind of throw themselves out, and then they're happy in the air and a happy camper, and they're able to fly for hours. But every takeoff just puts so much stress onto them because they've never really gone out with their wing and ground handled. Basic stuff, very basic stuff.
That's a great reminder to kind of just continually return back to those, the ABCs of flying, isn't it? I mean, I think that we always need to keep them close. Yeah. Yeah. I was blown away. My first super final, and I had just started competing that year, so I hadn't been to many comps. It was down in Colombia, and the launch there is very easy. It's grass, but it's often either dead air or just slightly over the back, so everybody's doing these running forwards on comp wings, which can be pretty amusing. And but I was surprised, like you would never see some of the techniques you see there, and that's at a super final. These are the best cross-country pilots in the world, and you see some pretty horrific techniques, and
For
just blown launch.
Or...
Yeah, just blown launch after blown launch after blown launch, which you would just never see in the acro world at all. And it really enforced in me, like, dude, you got to spend time ground handling, like, because you don't want to look like these guys.
Absolutely.
It's embarrassing.
I think it happens a lot with people who are going up to top-notch wings, and they're like, no, now I'm flying a good wing like that. I can't go back to doing ground handling like a beginner, or it must be something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Very bad idea. You're like, well, I'm not a good cross-country pilot or a proven one or whatever, but if I fly an Enzo, I want to know how to stall it, because I'm flying that machine and I want to have it in all the configurations above water, so I know what happens before I take it into some lee side in some competition stress pressure situation. No,
absolutely.
Kind of
I mean, I think one of the things that I've heard, I asked you at one point, what's the worst advice you've ever heard? This isn't advice, but one of the things that I've heard a lot of that's just wrong is, like they might be a really, really bad at launching. But they're a quote unquote air Jedi in the air, just an amazing. And I take issue with that. If you're not solid on the ground, you're also not solid in the air, because everything that's happening on the ground happens in the air, and you have to be able to feel it. Then you're not looking at the wing, and so if you're not an air Jedi on the ground, you're not that good in the air either. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean.
I do, up to a certain point. Like, the pendulum effect takes a lot of stress away. You have to beat a pendulum on the ground with your feet, right? You have to walk to what's happening in the air automatically. But absolutely, if you don't know how to feel your wing on the ground, it's probably going to be the same in the air. And it's just not complete. I mean, takeoff and landing is just part of paragliding. So So you might as well learn how to do it perfectly, right?
There you go. So to be, to summarize, to be a complete pilot, you need to have those skills really down. I mean, that's where 99% of the accidents happen, isn't it? So, okay, listeners,
Yeah, yeah.
listen up. Go out and ground handle more. I mean, this is something we talk about on a lot of shows here. But yeah, if this is the first show you're listening to with Christina here, then that's the message. That's the takeaway. Go ground handle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it just takes so much stress away as well, eh? Because I'm
Mm.
seeing that with my students. Those are, they're really good at ground handling after the beginner's hill, and they're really confident at taking off, and they're stressed about the flight. And the better they become, the less they'll go out ground handling, the more they'll go out flying, the worse they get at taking off. And in the end, they're just really, really stressed out when they have to take off, and it goes more or less whatever. It works out more or less, and they're like, whoo, finally, now I can start flying. But they're so stressed out by their takeoff, which they don't know if they're going to manage or not without an accident. So they can't really concentrate on having a nice flight either. Eh?
Sure.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
it's
not
it's over
useful
before
for.
they're even in the air, isn't it?
Exactly. Like, how can you want to be making 200 Ks if you don't know if you survive the takeoff, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. When you look at the videos of Kriegel taking off in just horrific conditions over and over and
Mhm.
over again, and you can just tell that I mean, that's why he's able to go out and crush. Is he keeps focusing
Yes.
on the basics, which is just so important.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and maybe a
Terrific.
thing for acro beginners or in general. Like, one important thing I think is as well to know who is flying out there, not to be a victim of the lemming effect, if you say that in English.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's really, really bad. That happens so much, and I see it so many times, and a lot of accidents could have been prevented just like, yeah, by not doing because it's flyable, because somebody is flying there already. And the other guy will be thinking, oh, if somebody else takes off, I can still continue flying. Or in accuracy, it a lot like, oh, if that guy flies close to the mountain and doesn't respect his box, I might just do the same. But that guy might be whatever, Francois Rogolski or like the world champion. So he might know what he's doing and you're not. So yeah, use your own brain and just stick to those safety advice things because they're there for a reason, right?
Mm. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, that you one of the most valuable things to know in flying is when not to fly.
Oh,
And
yes,
that's
absolutely. Oh, yes.
that's the one. That's the one that gets people. When you see somebody you know, that might be out on a terrible day that's flying, they might be way better than you are, or just a lot more dumb.
Right, exactly.
You don't know
Neither
which.
one, you're, yeah.
So let's talk about your win. You had this comp. You kind of came back to competition after having the terrible first one. I guess this was last year, and then so take me up to the big win in Annecy and what those runs looked like. Do you guys go into those with this is exactly what I'm going to do, or is there quite a bit of freestyle depending on how things are exiting and entering and um,
Right. So the comp in Annecy was a little bit different from the World Cups I've been to so far because the World Cups are like 3 or 4 days, and you usually have a lot of more altitude because the sites, there are different sites with more altitude. So you kind of have to plan your run. That's something you want to talk about afterwards.
hmm.
In Annecy, we had a lot less altitude than well we had at the 2 or 3 competitions I've been to before, and we had like 7 or 8 days, 7 days I think of valid runs plus 2 training days. So it's a lot longer than what we had until now, which is really interesting because in a normal competition you might get as a girl at least 1, 2, maximum 3 runs, I guess. So with the tricks you have, you can do something nice, and then you don't need more tricks because then the comp is over. In Annecy, we kind of had to plan and save up our tricks to have something by the end of the week. I think like one common mistake that people are making when they go to the first acro comp, at least, is just going like, yeah, I know how to do that. Let's just do it and fly and have fun. And then they're surprised when they're like towards the last places, which is exactly what happened to me. I was really frustrated. And this happens if you don't actually plan your run, and by having bad results, you actually learn that you kind of have to think about what you're going to do, and you have to plan a run for low altitude and for high altitude, and kind of have alternatives of what you can do if something goes wrong or if the connection turns out differently than what you want to. The more you've thought about it, the less surprised you'll be while you're flying, and the better points you can get, because if you're planning, you can actually, I mean, there is a rating system, and the better you plan them, the more points you will get. If you're just flying whatever you know how to do, you might miss those points for your next run, and might not get enough points for this run because you haven't done the right trick at the right time. So yeah, read the regulations, and planning your run, I've learned, is a big part of flying in competition. So in Annecy, it was really interesting because the altitude is quite low, and we had, or at least I had 2 runs ready in my mind for every time I flew out, one for low altitude, one for high altitude, plus minus 1 trick or 2 tricks even that I could add or deduct and still get the points I need and whatever, in case the altitude was lower or higher. So it was a lot of planning actually, which was surprising to me. Acro camps are a lot of planning if you want to be among the first places, I guess.
Give me an example of your the best run, or your last run.
My best run was actually my last run, which was, I think, because we had so many days of comps, and I basically do all the tricks that I know how to do without twisted. I basically do all the tricks to both sides, which is something not everybody does. And I basically practice all of them all the time because I don't do twisted stuff. So it doesn't take so much time off my time to do the twisted stuff. So I had a tumble to cork to the other side, to twister, to let me think, what was that? To misty, to dynamic full stall. Shall I explain all
Wow,
of that?
that sounds beautiful. I'm just imagining it all in my head.
It
That's
was a wonderful
fantastic.
run. And it worked out
Yeah.
perfectly because actually the last day I had the pressure of, because we were 2 girls having a close run. Nicole Schmidt, she's a very good pilot from Germany. And we were basically always fighting for 0 point something points during the whole comp. And the second last day, we both screwed it up a bit, but she a bit more than I, and she was just out of the last cut. And I was still inside, which meant that I had female title, and I didn't have to worry about like losing against her anymore. So the run was very relaxed and smooth, and actually had altitude for once. So it was very nice. And I think the guys, they were getting tired as much as anybody, but they still had the pressure, and they are training a lot of twisted stuff at a high level, which means they're taking that takes time off from them from doing the basic tricks that they don't practice so much anymore. So I had those basic tricks and they didn't. I still was like 12th or something, but that was pretty nice. I was one place behind Horacio Lawrence, which was for me like really great. So
Yeah.
the guys were getting towards their worst days and I was getting towards my best days, and nice 12th place. And the last run was really good for me, I think.
And you won the women's.
Exactly, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So what happens now? Where do you, when you got done with that comp, are you thinking, okay, more of these, or okay, I won the worlds, now I'm going to do something else?
Actually, I haven't decided yet.
Ah,
If I continue to fly competitions, it will definitely be in the same way that I've done so far, like flying for fun and no pressure at all. Because as soon as I put pressure in there, I notice that I do stupid things, that things become dangerous, and that I'm just not flying as good anymore or as relaxed anymore. So I definitely want to do a little bit of more cross-country flying. I might even do 1 or 2 cross-country comps, but for the reason of learning. If all the good cross pilots say that you learn a lot in cross-country comps, I mean,
hmm.
why shouldn't it be true? So I think that's a reason for me to do a little bit of that, to do more cross-country and know a little bit more, get a bit more experience, and to be finally able to do I think bivouac flights by my own. I think that's something I want to get more into.
Hmm.
And acro will always, I mean, it's just so much fun. It's too much fun to to let it go. So I'll definitely continue with acro flying, and I'm starting slowly to think that trying more twisted maneuvers might be something that could be fun. Yes.
I know it's impossible to predict this, but when you kind of look back at the history of acro, there's probably been quite a few times where people thought, okay, there will be no more tricks. That's there can't possibly be something else. But are there something? Is there something completely new that no one's ever seen on the horizon?
Not that I know of. I mean, there is fun stuff like what's the name of the American acro pilot that you had in show lately? I don't
Max
know his name.
Marion.
I mean, he has done some very fun stuff, like the flips in Infinite and something like that. That was very
Yeah,
new.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
like, wait, what?
exactly.
He's flipping in his harness during an infinite. I thought, wow, that's pretty neat.
It's hurting your shoulders. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Oh, the wonders of
Um,
youth. I love it.
right. Yeah, I don't know. In the end, you only have two breaks, and there are only so many points and strength levels that you can pull them with, right? So I don't know. But yeah, as you said, we have thought a lot, or they have thought a lot of times. There's no more space for new stuff, and there's always been something so far. So it's exciting to see what will come up next, right?
Yeah, and tell me about acro wings. This is another thing I don't know a lot about. With shark nose technology, and the what Ozone came up with in 2009, would just radically changed the sport of paragliding in cross country. Has the same thing happened with acro wings?
I think I'm too new into acro for actually talking about that.
Okay.
I've been flying acro for like 4 years or so.
Hmm.
Well, I guess one thing was that the doing infinites became a lot safer from what they tell me, and another thing is that the wings basically do esferas, which is something not all wings did safely before. So
Hmm.
basically now criteria for wings is as well that they're able to do esferas without you falling to the wing, I guess. Yeah, I'm more the kind of pilot who takes a ready wing that I know that it works and I'm having fun with it. I'm not a lot into construction, to be honest. Yeah.
And you said you're flying the Emily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a pretty wing.
It is.
Back to instructing, I just wanted to ask a couple more things about that process. When you're teaching these new students, does it take you back to when you were first learning? Like when you think back to your 50-hour self, is there advice or that you either got and didn't follow, or advice that you wish you would have gotten when you look back to your first year?
Hmm. I think I got a lot of good advice, and one of those pieces of advice was to listen to everybody, but to use your own brain while processing what you're hearing. And I think that's a piece of advice I'd give on, like everybody, the typical you're coming to takeoff and everybody knows everything. There is some truth in those things. Not a lot of it is like it's better to let it right straight out of your head again. But I still go up to pilots when I'm at a new spot and ask them, hey, what about the weather? Hey, what about this? What about that? Because they know and it's useful. And I still gladly take advice from people, no matter what, like technique wise, landing wise, whatever,
Hmm.
weather wise. Yeah, and I have had the basis of learning, and that's what I always tell my students, like you're learning the basics here, which means that you're able to use your own brain afterwards, listen to people, but like, yeah, use your brain to know if that's a useful piece of advice or not.
Hmm.
But get it and don't become arrogant and think you know it all. I think that's like one of the biggest mistakes after 1 year of flying or so, when nothing has happened to you, people are well, I was like that. I'd become invincible,
Hmm.
because nothing has happened and whatever, all those things that accidents and people, all those things that people have been telling me about accidents, it can't happen to me because nothing has happened so far. And that's a really dangerous point, I think, like 1 year or so after having started to fly. So staying humble and still taking advice and still trying things out for yourself is something very useful. And I think something else which is useful is just knowing why you fly, like in a sense of taking it slowly. I've seen a lot of people who are going very, very fast because they want to become champion, or they want to do comps in after 1 year of having started to fly, or they see people flying in Organia and they want to do infinity in 1 month or something like that. And I think that leads to a lot of behavior that isn't useful for flying. Usually those people scare themselves and don't continue or have bad accidents, or some of them become really, really good as well. Like everybody's got a different path, but I think it's very useful to know why you're flying and why you're flying, not where you want to go, because that can change. But a lot of people have these goals, and I have the impression that they don't even appreciate flying as such, because they're like, oh, I want to do infinite and I want to do comps. And you're like, yeah, but for now you've been flying for 3 months, and are you actually enjoying it? Or, I mean,
We had a
I
really
think,
interesting discussion in the last show with Tom Payne about X contest. You know, he's like the guy I fly with, and one of my supporters in the X Alps. We got really into the chocolate bar for a couple of years. You know, on X contest, where every 100K flight, you know, you get a quote unquote a chocolate, not a real chocolate, but then they add them all up, and at the end of the season, you know, whoever has the most chocolates, and I think he won it 2 or 3 years in a row, and
oh,
we
nice.
talked about, which was nice, and it was also really fun, and it gave you it helped make you plan your day, which I think is really important, and it helped you create tasks, and it helped you get the most out of the day. But it also
Mhm.
what we were talking about is the, you know, the evil, that's the good side, and the evil side is that you're chasing numbers,
Yeah,
and that
right.
can be, and that can cloud why we do it, can it? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
it has to be
Exactly.
fun first. um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's like, yeah, when the pilots land after 198 Ks and they're really frustrated and angry. I mean, I
right.
can understand that you're pissed because you didn't get to 200, but I mean, did you have a nice flight? Hello.
Yeah,
That kind of
exactly.
thing. I think, yeah, I think that's really important to not forget that.
Mm.
Like last year in Organia, I met a guy who was really nice, and he just came from this Civ, and he was more towards the beginner level. Uh, Civ SIV, right?
Hmm.
And he was like, yeah, it was nice, but I didn't even do full stalls, and like really as if it was just shit what he'd been doing. And I was like, well, I didn't tell him. I was like, oh yeah, look at that. But afterwards I was thinking, I mean, why would you have to do full stalls? I'm sure you learned what you needed to learn. Otherwise, the instructor would have made you do it. And that SIV was there to show you new stuff. And why would you need a full stall at your stage of flying? Did you enjoy what you learned? I mean, I should have told him all those things. Like this
Mm.
pressure of becoming better and of seeing really good pilots, which happens, of course, in Organia, and wanting to be the same and thinking that everything they do is like inferior and you're only really cool if you're among the top. I think that's a mistake because it leads you away from why you're doing this, right?
Mm.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's good to be mindful of how precious each one is in whatever manner it is. It's always precious. We're flying. It's ridiculous.
It's,
It's just completely
exactly.
ridiculous.
Yeah, that alone is mind-boggling. That's why I'm doing it, and I think it's good if you know why you're actually doing it.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
also for when something bad happens to you, like coming back to remembering why you're actually flying. Are you flying to become the champion or to chase that record or to whatever, or are you flying because it's fun? Or I think that's important to know. That's
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
that would be a tip that I'd give newcomer.
Fantastic. Okay, one area I'd love to get into, because this has been extremely interesting with our previous female guests. I want to ask you some male female stuff. um,
Oh dear. Sounds promising.
first, I'd like to hear about, you know, how is it tricky to manage a relationship that's, you know, when you're dating somebody that's in the industry, that's in the sport that you love. Is that challenging? Is it great?
Actually, I think it would be a real handicap if my boyfriend didn't fly.
Okay.
If you're flying as much as I do and flying as much as he does, I don't know, like if you have to fight every weekend about if you're able or allowed to go flying or not, that wouldn't work for me. So we don't have any, discussions about where the next holiday is going to be. or what it's going to be about, because it's just going to be, is it going to be the Dolomites or Slovenia or whatever?
Right, right.
That's,
It
I
has
mean,
it's
it's
going to be a
perfect.
paragliding trip.
Absolutely, absolutely. It can be annoying, of course, because sometimes you get into whatever competition mode or comparison mode, and he's just a much better pilot than I am. So he
Mm.
always gets the applause. I'd have people come up to me and say, "Oh, I saw you top landing." I was like, "Oh, yeah, but your boyfriend, he is good." I'm like, go fuck yourself. So, I mean, that's probably, yeah. That's the biggest problems we have in that kind of respect. So
Right,
it
right.
would be much worse if he didn't fly.
Is it challenging for you at all to get advice from him because he's your boyfriend, or is that are you cool with that?
It's challenging to get advice from him because we don't talk the same language in paragliding. Like, you
Ah,
have people that exactly talk the same way as you feel things or as you live them, and he doesn't. So I would have
interesting.
loved to get a, yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's like, I don't know, did you experience that when you're getting advice from people or tips,
Yes, totally.
and you
Yeah,
just can't relate to what they're saying,
yeah.
even though they're
No,
right?
totally. Yeah, I get that all the time. I mean, it really, everybody learns in a different way, don't we? And it's,
Yeah, yeah, right, right. So he's
that's
more a
really
technical kind
interesting.
of guy, like axis and then this axe because the angles and whatnot, whatever. And I'm like, no, just tell me how much I have to pull with what time.
Right.
So, yeah,
So
he's been teaching me a
you're more
lot, but
kinetic,
like,
and he's more kind of an engineer.
exactly, he's much more technical. I'm more like feeling, and yeah, great. At that time, I have to pull that much,
Yeah, I'm the
which is
same
why I'm not a
way.
good cross country pilot. I don't think about flying. Same for you.
I'm the same way. I mean, I'm more a cross country pilot, but yeah, I'm the same way. I'm not very technical, and I was one of the things we talked about is how many engineers are really pulled to paragliding. You find a lot. I mean, real
Yeah,
engineers, that's their job, and it's they're very technical about it. Like talking to
yeah,
Tom
yeah.
Payne last week, that he's incredibly analytical, and I mean,
Right. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't understand fabrics or how the things go together. Or, I mean, I don't. It's just not even
Same
interesting
here.
to me because I don't understand it. So
I know what you mean
it
completely.
goes, it flies. I'm in. I'm in. It sounds good. So,
Yeah, we're into this on the same page there, I guess. Yeah. It's great if you can combine those two areas. Like
yeah.
that's what I'm trying to do now in order to be able to fly cross country at all, because I'm just like, yeah, yeah, great, I'm flying. Like, oh, you have to think about the shape of that cloud or where the wind is coming from, that kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Sure.
It's good if you can combine it, yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Are there disadvantages to being a female in acro?
That's an interesting question. Like, um, it was a big advantage for me because I was the only girl in Argania for a long time and people have been taking a lot of care of me.
Mm.
But wing wise, I actually had a big issue with my last wing for the last 2 years because it was exactly the same model from RG. It produced the same model for 2 years. And I didn't believe that it was due to my size and exactly that wing for a long time until I just had to believe it. My wing was a 16 Emily, and with my weight, which is like, what's my weight? Like 75 kilos takeoff weight or something with everything. It wouldn't do the Esfera properly. Like it would do it, but it was a very nasty feeling. And I learned Esfera, which is basically a trick where from infinite, you just basically wait until it comes down from one side, or you can steer it with a little brake input or with your weight. And then you just go, yeah, put your hands up and wait until you see it's ready for set, and then you pull a set. So it's extremely easy. And I did my first 10 or so on an 18 Emily, and it was perfect and everything worked nice. I'm like, oh, the most or the trick that gives you the most points in a comp, and so easy. Yeah, great. And from when I had my 16 onwards, I just had massive problems with this fair. Like I had a lot of theoretical sessions with the really good pilots like Horacio or Teo or Francois. And they're like, no, it's just a nasty moment that you have to pass through. And I'm like, okay, well, if you say so. But it was a very nasty moment.
Huh.
And I've tried everything basically. And this summer, I had the worst experience of my paragliding life. I fell into my wing because I tried something and I tried it wrong. And I was totally desperate because this fucking Esfera just wouldn't work. And at some point towards the end of the season, a friend from New Zealand, Brooke, he just took my wing and was like, well, let me see if it's really that horrible. And I was hoping that he'd say, well, it's really horrible. I'm sorry, that's just the wing. And he came back, he gave me the wing and he was like, it's perfectly fine. I don't know what you got. I'm like, no, come on, don't tell me that. And we had a look at the videos, and he was doing basically the same thing I did, but it just looked perfectly nice and fine. And I showed him my video, and I was doing the same thing that he would do, but it was just horrible, absolutely horrible. He's like, wow, okay, I understand why you've been crazy for the whole summer. And I finally had to believe that the 16 wouldn't work with my weight in a sphere. Brooke had like 20 Ks or 30, I don't know, more than I did, and it worked perfectly fine. And it was very interesting because 16 is quite a small size, but only people who would be heavier would work on those wings. Like all the good pilots are guys, and they force, I mean, they have like 20 or 30 Ks more than me. And for them, those wings work, but for me, it wouldn't. And I would have had to trim it myself to make it work for my weight. While with an 18, it was working with my weight. So that was very interesting
Huh,
and
okay.
frustrating.
Yeah, no kidding. So there's not a definitive difference, but it seems like there's this problem with certain tricks with being light.
Well, you just have to trim the wing yourself. Like
Ah,
this, those wings are trimmed by extremely good pilots, right? Until they work for them. And they kind of work more or less well, but at a certain level. I mean, it's no problem for all the other tricks, but at a certain level, in order to have the perfect trick for your wing and your size and whatnot, all your weight, you might have to, whatever, take a few millimeters off one line and add a few millimeters off another or something. That's just something that comes up, and that's something I don't know anything about. And I guess if I got into it, I could have fixed that 16 to be perfect with my weight, but yeah, I didn't know
okay.
enough about it.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. So it probably is fixable with some tweaking.
exactly. As opposed to if you just have the weight the same weight as the guys do, you just
You
take a
just
wing
fly
that
it.
works perfectly because they have been trimming it to work exactly, for that weight.
Okay.
So,
You fell into your wing. That would be remiss of me to not rewind to that. What happened?
yeah, getting technical. So the Asphera, as I said, you can be in, it's basically when you're in infinite and you make it go to one side, either by a brake input or by your weight. And basically it's hands up and weight depending on your wing until you see the side, you pull it. You can, and there's a little wave that you pass. It's basically the wing while coming down from vertical infinite towards like horizontal, towards sat position. It makes a little wavy movement, which is not very nice when you're the pilot. But in order to make that wave a little smaller, you can, while the wing is coming down at a certain point, pull a little bit of brake, like minimal, like a few millimeters. And it will make the wave not as nasty. I'm talking what the guys have been telling me because I've never managed with that wing and my size or my weight. And so while trying that, I actually pulled the brake way too much because, yeah, I was like on a rodeo. So it's very hard to pull a few millimeters and to keep it. Yeah, pulled it way too much, released it without actually noticing. I was rhythming back into the axis. I was coming back to infinite while it was going down. And I reacted completely wrong because I actually I didn't think that my wing would come straight back above my head or I would go straight above the wing. Yeah, fell into it. Was bad reaction. Yeah, whatever. Kind of
Ooh.
mistake.
And then what, did you have to peel yourself out and throw?
Um, well, I saw the wing coming towards me and I was like, oh man, now we've come to that point where I'm going to kiss the wing. And when I realized that it's wrapped around me and that it wouldn't come out of it anymore, I just grabbed the handle with both hands and I just threw it out like I didn't think at all. And I was just lucky it just opened. Otherwise, I guess, yeah, fight as much. I would have had to fight as much as I can and see if that rescue opens. I was lucky it opened straight away.
Huh. Do you fly with a cutaway?
No, I should though. I really should.
Okay, so most of the acro pilots are.
Not that I know of. I know a few,
Oh,
but a lot of them aren't actually. But
oh.
it's a very good idea, I think.
Okay, okay. So they aren't. Is there a reason they aren't other than just expense or?
I don't think it's expensive. We fly with so much expensive equipment. I think the $30 for a cutaway
Yeah. So why
won't
why
make a
don't they?
difference.
Why isn't everybody?
Very good question. For me personally, it's because I've just never gotten around to doing it. Like I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's one of those things I really should get, and I've never done
Okay.
so, which is very
Okay.
stupid. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Sure, yeah.
that's good to know. Do you have do you have reserve opinions in terms of, square, round, regalo? Um,
Hmm. Depends on the kind of pilot you are. If you have a lot of money and you don't mind the weight, I think the acro base is probably the best option you can get, because within 2 seconds you have a new wing above your head, which is
mm,
basically, yeah, the thing you want. Other than that, I don't know. For beginners, the regalo is probably not the best idea, because you have to be active. You have to do something in order to make it work. For acro pilots training above ground, a regalo, or I mean, if you can afford the base harness, is probably best. It seems like the square rescue is very good in terms of pendulum stability,
mm,
but there has been a guy testing all of them, and he has come up with the results that actually the square one has a little bit of forward speed, which is something that's not always good if you're training close to a mountain. You don't, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're above a lake, but if you're close to the wall, it's not something you want to have, right?
right, because it could turn downwind.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
and then
Or
have a
the
little bit
wind
of
could just
speed.
take you. Exactly. You have the
Okay,
additional speed of the wing and the wind, and you can actually come back towards the mountain very quickly, which is
right.
not a nice thing.
Mm,
But
mm.
there was only one guy actually pointing that out, so it must be something that's not a very present issue on square rescues. I think you have to inform yourself about what you need to do. All of the rescues have advantages and disadvantages, and then you just have to decide which one you can live with and which one you can't.
Okay. Cool. Well, I really appreciate your time, so I don't want to take too much more of it, and we've already soaked up a whole bunch of your time just trying to track this down, haven't we, for the last the last couple months? So
You're right.
I just wanted one more question, and then we'll end it on that. You obviously have a passion for Organia, but for someone that's coming into the sport that wants to learn acro, where would you send them in the world? You've sounds like you've flown all over the place. Do you have a favorite spot? And it doesn't have to be an acro spot. Do you just have a favorite spot to fly?
Well, for me personally, it's Organia and it's Iquique, right?
Okay.
But for somebody starting out with acro, those are definitely not the right places to learn. Anywhere with a high mountain, a lot of altitude is good, a lake is good, and the right people around you who will give you the good information, because that's a very important factor. Yeah.
Tell me about Iquique, because I have been to Chile. I've done a lot of sailing down there, but I've never done any flying there. What's the magic of Chile?
The magic of Iquique is that it's in the desert and that you actually can fly every day without ever watching a weather report. That's really awesome.
Mm,
The issue is it's a place that looks very easy, but it's got the same dangers as any other place, and people might forget because it
mm.
looks so easy and because there'll always be a few very good pilots. And it's always the problem if you see very good pilots, it looks easy, you try it yourself and it doesn't work. Yeah, it's very low for acro. You have a place above town which is very low, so it's good for training what you already know and you want to make perfect.
Hmm.
And you have the dune, which is really, really nice to get a lot of altitude. But when you're going high, it's usually a bit bumpy as well, so you have to live with that. And it's a great place for ground handling and for working your technique on the ground, which is a very important part of paragliding for me. So you can actually only go up if you're able to ground handle your glider up to a certain height. And from there, you can turn around and soar up the rest. So it's awesome training, and you just spend whatever between, well, as much as you like, but you can spend up to 7-8 hours a day if you're very motivated. You can spend that flying and using playing with your wing, which of course will make you better.
Oh, it sounds ideal for that kind of thing. I love where you can just sit on the beach and get your wing over your head and tow you up the hill a little bit and launch. There's no better
Oh,
training than
it's so
that,
much
is there?
fun. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And just play around on the ground. It's so much fun. Like when I'm at the dune, I usually don't even fly acro. I'm just playing on the ground and having fun and dragging my feet through the sand and whatever, trying the odd savvy touch or something. It's just great. It gives you such a good feeling for your glider.
Sounds brilliant. Fantastic. Well, on that note, Christina, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and there's some fantastic information there. And I hope we catch up in person one of these days. And I hope you get some
That'd be great.
snow over there in Austria.
That'd be great too. Yeah, thank you, Gavin. It was nice talking to you too, and thanks for having me here.
I wish that we could talk about it, but that's the problem with someone new.
I hope you enjoyed that. It was great to finally track Christina down. Some awesome advice there. Great things we all need to be reminded of from time to time. Again, as I said in the top of the show, I'm going to be doing a little film tour here next week with North Unknown down the west coast of Canada and the U.S. Hope you can come join me. You'll find those schedules and venues and dates and everything on the cloudbasedmayhem.com or on my Facebook page. Please, if you can, support the show. You can do that on the website, cloudbasedmayhem.com. You'll find the links for that if you want to do a one-off support. All we ask for, as always, is $1 a show. You can do that through PayPal or this new way we've got, patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. On there, you can kind of set it and forget it. And if you do, you get access to all kinds of great bonus material, like the Magic Bus Tour from Larry Tudor, which I just uploaded this morning. I invite you to go in there and check it out. I highly suggest you listen to that one. It is absolutely hysterical. It'll make your day. That's about it. We'll see you on the next show. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your day. Cheers.